and welcome to the show. This week's FailRace versus the community, we were racing B-class cars on Forza 5. However, the cars had to have drag tyres on them, so it would make for some interesting racing. And tyre conservation and tyre wear would actually play a very big factor in this. The first race was at Laguna Seca, a skyline. It took a little bit of a touch, ended up spinning around. Not quite as bad as the catapulting BMW that would kill another M3, did quite a lot of damage to the M3 and promptly killed the front suspension of my car. Suspension damage on here makes your car very hard to drive, so me and the BMW were in a little bit of trouble. Aside from the slightly shaky start, lag wasn't too bad on this game. It was a little bit dodgy at times, but it wasn't quite as atrocious as it has been on Forza 4. The drag tyres affect the handling, shall we say. The cars are still perfectly drivable, however all of them will have a little bit more understeer, and this Hyundai, as you can see, was struggling to get around the corners. The Corvette then did a little bit of rallycross on the sand stuff, almost lost his position, and then the Hyundai understeered on the exit. The Corvette sort of does a bit of a cutback, ends up on the outside for the final corner. It's side by side behind them as well with the Lotus and something else. What was it? Skyline, there we go. Lotus gets the better of the Skyline. The Hyundai can't quite make it back past the Corvette, and we've got the drag race down the start-finish line, of which the Corvette looks like it's winning. Don't worry about the broken BMW that is staying out of the way there in the first corner. Hyundai kind of has a little bit of a look into the first corner, and then you get the understeer. It's not sort of atrocious, like really atrocious understeer, not when your tyres are still fairly new at this stage, but it's certainly noticeable. It's certainly a bit of a change than perhaps what you're used to. You've got to drive the cars a slight bit different with these. At the front there was to be a change for the lead, as the Nissan 370Z that was leading got a little bit of a slide on, couldn't quite keep his car on the road, ends up about a bit too wide, and the NSX can breeze past. The Nissan thinks about it, can't really do very much into the next corner. Just didn't have that little bit of understeer, and he couldn't quite gather it up onto that back straight bit. Most of the action though was going on further back. I think this was 7th and back. We were all in a rather large group, and I was following the Scirocco through, as again the Lotus just got a slight bit out of position. It's all it takes. You need to do just be slightly out of position, and then the understeer will get you if you aren't careful. It takes a bit of getting used to driving these cars on the drag tyres. The Scirocco then goes for the inside. I'm presuming it's a rear-wheel drive converted Scirocco, judging by the size of the slide there. Gets to the inside of the Skyline as they run down the start-finish straight. And it looks like he can hold on to his position. I was having problems with the handling of my Mitsubishi, and I went to go play Rallycross. The Skyline had a look at the inside on the exit of the first corner. Can't really do very much about it. And the Lotus is still fairly close within range. On all of these races, it tended to be the midfield that was a lot more exciting, a lot more going on as a Genesis struggles to make the corner. That was quite a common sight, that sort of thing going on. Someone just misjudging a corner and just understeering off. A few laps later, and I'd caught up to the back of the Skyline and breezed past it in a straight line. The Nissan was struggling on the speed front, however, had very good handling as he tries to get up the inside through the first corner. Much better handling than my Mitsubishi. Gets himself to the inside for the next one, and I have to do things the hard way. Fortunately for me, the Skyline, with all of these cars struggling with a little bit understeer, means that as we go too wide through here, the Skyline has to be a little bit cautious not to just simply understeer and bump me off the track as we go side by side through the next bit. And then I have a bit of a breather as we come to a straight. I was surprised I managed to hold the Skyline off around the outside of those two corners, but I'd managed to get away with that. The Scirocco was certainly doing most of the overtaking on this track. Having cleared that little group, he moved on to the back of a Corvette. Again, fairly similar story with me and the Skyline. The Corvette, the quicker of the two in the straight line. The Scirocco, though, doing much better through the corners. And then, of course, we've got all the tyre wears to factor in as well. And the big American muscle cars were struggling, shall we say, on the tyre wear front a little bit more than some of the other vehicles around here. Like most of the time, your tyre wear will be okay. Is sort of, you can go up to sort of 50, 60, 70% before things start becoming a real problem. After that, then you start sliding around, you start losing more grip. The Corvette here is just a bit out of position on the exit. Can't get a very good drive towards this final corner, and this fairly simple move for the Scirocco. I guess sort of a little bit of a poor exit, but the Corvette can't really do very much about it. There was still racing going on all down the field. I think this is the Skyline that was in 12th. Had a little bit of an off on the final corner, and I think that was a fairly broken BMW. I'm not sure if he ended up in the pits or not. It goes past him as they come into turn 1. There is a big dive, and I'm not entirely sure that was an intentional dive, as the Skyline looks like it has its rear brakes locked up completely going into that corner, then lights the rear tyres up. That's not good for tyre wear, doing that. And then it's a brave move from the MR2 to go around the outside of a very slidey Nissan. I'm presuming that that is fairly high tyre wear going on in the Nissan. One of the Dodges, you were being brave using a muscle car for this, as the Dodge had ruined its tyres completely. You can tell when the tyres are gone because you just lose steering. The front tyres are gone on the Dodge here. If it was the rear tyres, it would just be spinning around in a circle, but as it is, there is just a mountain of understeer. There is absolutely nothing you can do about it. Once your tyres are gone, yeah, you are going to have incredibly slow lap times. So the Dodge peeled into the pits to go and get some new tyres. You will lose a hell of a lot less time for doing this than you would if you tried to carry on with destroyed tyres for a couple of laps. At the front though, it was to be the NSX that was to take the victory by quite a large margin. At the front it was very spread out between the top 3 or 4 cars. I think there was huge gaps in between them. There were, as I said, there were a few cars damaged on with the opening laggy collision. But yeah, the leader had a huge margin back to second, and second had a fairly huge margin to third, and so on. It was the further back that was the more interesting of the races in this one. The Corvette that was holding, I think it was around 5th place at the time, had killed his tyres onto the final lap. I guess he had hoped he could make it around the final few corners, couldn't quite do it, and again the Corvette has just got absolutely none of the steering. I thought I was going to go around the outside of him. I quickly chickened out of it when I realised he just wasn't stopping and wasn't turning. My Mitsubishi had kept onto its tyres remarkably well, actually, around here, considering I was a rear-wheel drive car. The Corvette just just nothing. Couldn't make any of the corners. That's what happens when you destroy your tyres. Our second race, we headed on towards the Nürburgring GP track. This one was going to be tougher on the tyres than the first one. So we'd already seen a few cars struggling. There had been a little bit of an altercation into turn 1. And as we've seen a few times, I sort of just hugged the inside and let all of the chaos happen. Sometimes that gets away with that. I normally do that. Other times you get involved in it. This time it worked for my Mitsubishi. I then proceeded to try and go in between 2 cars, which is always an interesting thing to try and do, especially when everybody's all a bit understeery and not really quite sure what they're doing with their motor vehicle. I got away with it though. There's a Lotus going for a bit of an exploration out wide. Yeah, opening lap in this is quite scary. The drag tyres, you're never quite sure what you're going to get with them. Under braking and turning in as the Skyline ended up on the grass, and once you kind of get stuck out there, especially on the opening lap, you're stuck on the grass somewhere. Trying to rejoin the track can be a bit of a pain. So thank you to the Skyline for being patient and not just barging on and causing a big accident. Coming up towards the hairpin for the first time, and I get rather brave as I try and get up the inside of the Scirocco. A few cars had an off, simply not stopping in time or understeering off. The Dodge had a little bit of a touch with the Genesis that allowed me to get past as well. So 2 places in 1 hairpin, can't complain of that. And the Hyundai was struggling with understeer through the next chicane, so I sweep around the outside, and I'd managed to go from, I think, 16th on the grid to 4th. Not a bad start for my Mitsubishi. Unfortunately, there would be a bit of a shunt at the chicane and would take out 4 of us as everybody continues arguing through the next corner. Yeah, it was certainly eventful. There was certainly a lot going on with cars on slightly odd tyres. And where did we see this before? It was the 370Z again with the NSX. I had the grid on random. I'm pretty sure the grid was identical from the first race for this second one. I don't know. I don't know why random isn't random whatsoever. Either way, the Nissan just got a bit of understeer again out over the curb. It managed to gather it up without spinning. It was pretty close on that one. And then there's the drag race down the front straight. Although both of them were compromised coming down here, in the end the NSX can just about get the position. Not sure if there's a little bit of a bump there from the Nissan. Either way, the NSX has got the position. And yeah, the Nissan just doesn't quite have the grip or the speed. The NSX was ridiculously fast around here. Further back, this was the battle for 4th and 5th, I believe, between the Scirocco and the BMW. They'd both had much better starts to this run. The Scirocco was struggling with a bit of oversteer, which was rare in cars on here, unless you were really pushing it, and ended up out over the curbs. As per usual, the curbs on this game can be pretty mean, and they caused a few problems for cars. You really do not want to be sliding at all, if you can help it, because that'll kill your tyres even quicker. Scirocco got a great drive out of the last corner, and then gets up the inside for the... I don't really like these corners. These are very, very bumpy, nasty corners on here. It's a good move from the Scirocco, though, to get the position back there. And then we've got another run down to the hairpin. The Scirocco, though, was making pretty good progress. BMW just didn't really have the speed and was relying on the Scirocco in front having problems with its tyre wear to really make up sort of any ground on it. And it was a couple of, well, probably a lap later. I think there's only 5 laps in this one. It's a pretty long lap around this Nürburgring track, and the CRX in 3rd was coming under pressure from that little battle we saw earlier. CRX was struggling around this track. Not sure what it was. Maybe it was tyre wear or just the car not particularly well suited for this sort of track. It was struggling coming out of the final corner. There was slides from both of the cars out there. BMW went for a little trip across the grass. Again, just a bit of understeer covered in there, I think, on the BMW front. CRX was a pretty quick car in a straight line, though, as it cruises up towards the back of the Scirocco, but it doesn't really have the handling. And this is a track that has quite a lot of fast corners in it. Part of the reason why I picked it was I knew it had a fair few fast corners to make it interesting on the tyres, and for these sort of corners you do need a car with some grip, basically. And of course, the cars with some grip were taking the corners faster and were killing their tyres quite quickly. The Scirocco did seem to be struggling. I'm not sure if that was just trying to be a bit too brave on the drag tyres, or whether that was the tyre wear sort of starting to kick in. I should point out this was by far the most interesting thing going on the track. As I said, quite a few cars were broken and it became very spread out. I think this was now over 3rd place, as BMW yet again profits from the Scirocco having a slight problem. But as they run down the back straight up towards the next chicane, the Scirocco is really the quicker of the two cars. Also, one thing I did learn from this, defending with drag tyres is actually very, very tricky, because the amount of understeer you get. BMW goes very defensive into this chicane and then just gets all of the understeer and can't really do anything about it. So defending is actually quite tricky on here. If you end up, as I said, you end up out of position on these kind of tyres, you can cause yourself all sorts of problems with the large amounts of understeer that you get. At the front, it was the NSX yet again that had taken the lead and had vanished away from the field. There you go. I was almost lapped, wasn't quite lapped in this one, having had to go to the pits to fix all the damage to my Mitsubishi. Yeah, these were more sort of intriguing races than highly exciting races. There wasn't the huge amount of overtaking going on that we sometimes get in versus the community. There's not always lots of overtaking going on, but it was intriguing to see what cars could last and what cars couldn't last on the tyres, and who had to be conservative. As the Scirocco didn't have a happy ending, unfortunately. It had been lying in 3rd, but it managed to kill its rear tyres, just absolutely shredded them. As you can see, this is what happens with 100% rear tyre wear. You turn into a corner and you go round. Yeah. That's never a good sign. That's in 5 laps of the Nürburgring GP track, and the Scirocco had just chewed through its rear tyres. I don't think any other cars had killed their tyres on this one. A few cars had pitted for damage. I don't think anyone else had killed their tyres. We move on to our 3rd and final race on the trickiest track of them all. This is the most evil track I could come up with for tyre wear, while still sort of keeping it within reasonable race length. This is the Burmese Alps Club circuit. This is pretty much all fast corners around here. There is one corner that is slightly slow. Hard place to overtake on, but that's not the issue around here. The issue around here is keeping your tyres alive, and I was having to do crash avoidance yet again. I think there's a bit of a touch between the very slidey Nissan and something else into that corner, and yeah, you don't need that kind of thing where you're driving cars that are fairly unpredictable as it is. A rather bright orange BMW went for a big dive up the inside of a Hyundai. It's worth a try. Almost got away with it. Hyundai ends up understeering out quite wide around that corner to the next one. The BMW struggling a little bit as a Corvette goes around the outside, and Nissan's trying to get in on the action, and the Nissan sure enough gets to the inside of the next corner. This is a tough track on how you want to race it. If you want to try and keep your tyres alive, you want to drive a little bit conservatively. However, when there are lots of cars around you, you just instinctively go racing. And as you will see with all of these cars, yeah, nobody was being conservative. Everybody was trying to overtake the cars in front of them. And of course, as you overtake, you end up pushing your car a little bit more. You might start getting it oversteering, or you might get it out of shape in various places. So, yeah, nobody was taking it easy. I was still on crash avoidance in this race. As you can't really see it until the very last minute, BMW had a big moment over the hill. I think he may have had a slight tap from somebody. Ended up spinning it around, and I very, very nearly had a big crash. That was a trouser browning moment. That one, yeah, I got away with that. that was pretty damn scary, I have to say. Again, there was plenty of close racing. There wasn't a huge amount of overtaking in this one. As I said, this is a pretty damn tough track to overtake on at the best of the times, let alone when you've got lots of cars understeering. So there's quite a lot of this, sort of groups of cars following each other around, sort of waiting for somebody in front to make a mistake. And making mistakes was quite easy in this, especially on a track like this, when your car tends to have quite a lot of understeer. So yeah, there wasn't huge amounts of overtaking, but it was a lot more tactical in some respects. This race, which it was different. I have to say, I did quite enjoy the difference from this one, from a normal versus the community race. Yet again, the muscle car was doing okay, but this is not really a track for a speed car. The Dodge very fast in a straight line, but didn't really have the grip around the corners. I tried to make it 3 wide through turn 1, which is not the cleverest of ideas. In the end, I had to back out of that one. Again, we see the Dodge come flying past the skyline, but can't really do very much about it when it comes to the corner, and the Dodge is understeering, and I can get my Mitsubishi up the inside and make another position. Yeah, this is a pretty tough track on your more straight line speed based cars. Fortunately for the Dodge, you could get one of the positions back, as the Skyline had an altercation with a wall. Tyre wear would soon become a problem, and I think it was early as lap 4 perhaps, halfway through the race. 8 lap race around here. Is either lap 4 or 5. Cars started pulling into the pits, knowing that they couldn't make it. Their tyre wear was just too high. This Corvette that we saw killed its tyres at Laguna was one of the first to pit. Yeah, this is where the intrigue came to this race. When did you pit, and did you have to pit? At this stage, some cars were chewing through tyres. The big muscle cars, as you would expect, were chewing through rear tyres. The four-wheel drive cars were chewing through their tyres as well. I did a brief bit of testing before building my car, and I converted my Mitsubishi to rear-wheel drive in an attempt to save tyres. Four-wheel drive, not good for this kind of thing. I presume front-wheel drive wouldn't be good either. Definitely rear-wheel drive is the way to go if you're going for some tyre conservation. I think this was the battle for third, as the Nissan 370Z does a very brave manoeuvre all the way around the outside of one of the longest corners. Won't have helped the tyres that much, but a spectacular overtake nonetheless. And for me, that one gets overtake of the evening for going all the way around the outside of a very, very long final corner. That is, yeah, don't see that done particularly any race. I don't think I've seen cars do that. The tyre problems soon came, as various cars tried to eke their tyres out, but unless you'd been driving conservatively, your tyres weren't really going to make it, as this Skyline was to find out coming into the final corner, all locked up and sideways, and 3 wide with understeering cars never quite works, as the Scirocco comes up a bit unfortunate on that one. Tiniest of bumps between the lot of them. And the Volkswagen ends up spinning. The Skyline, though, is completely out of tyres, and he too has to dive in the pits to get some new ones. The minute you lose your tyres around here, you lose so much time. You're better off going into the pit lane. You know, if you've got a few laps to go, there is nothing to be gained from staying out. As the MR2 would find out, he'd worked his way up into second as various cars had pitted in front of him, but the tyres were gone. And then it is not at all hard to overtake. Once your tyres are gone, everybody will absolutely fly past you. And yet again, the MR2 found his way back into the pit lane. At the front, and it was the NSX that would take the victory. The NSX was one of, I think, only 3 people tried to brave it out. I'm not sure if the third person did or not. The NSX tried to brave the entire 8 laps. And his tyres were shot by the final lap. He had such a huge lead that it was okay, and all the cars behind him decided to come into the pits, so the NSX would still take the win by a fair margin, but as you can see, the tyres are shredded. There is just no speed around these final couple of corners, but he had enough of a lead to get away with it, so the Honda takes 3 wins out of 3 for a very quick NSX. I was one of the other drivers that had tried to brave it out, since I was fairly well down the order, having been involved in avoiding absolutely everything that was going on. I thought I had nothing to lose, so I'd give it a go. I drove a little bit cautiously, tried to keep my tyres alive, but even then they died with half a lap to go. And the MR2 that you saw come into the pits, yeah, that came breezing past on the final corner. I still managed to make my way to 6th, which is probably better than I would have done if I'd gone into the pits. It was worth a try. I did everything I could to try and keep the tyres alive. Mitsubishi was pretty good on tyre wear as well, for me to have got this far before they died. But it wasn't going to be a spectacular finish for me, as I crawled around the final few corners. This was the argument over, I think, 12th or 13th place. They were still going at it as if it was for the victory between the Dodge and a Nissan Skyline. Both of these, I believe, would come into the pits, so didn't have to worry too much about tyres. The car in front of them, I'm not sure. I think he stayed out, because the BMW had absolutely no turning. Caught out the Skyline that ended up giving a little bit of a bump. BMW's understeering off into a wall. It's a surprising amount of airtime bouncing off the wall, but it's the drag race between the Dodge and the Skyline for what is now 11th place, and the Dodge we saw was quick earlier on, beats the Skyline across the line. Not by very much, but yeah, he does in the end get, I think, he's in 11th place. So there we go. That was it for the drag tyre challenge. It was surprisingly good fun. It was a lot more kind of tactical and intriguing than it was outright sort of racing going on. It was different. I did quite enjoy some of the races, trying to keep your tyres alive for them. Unfortunately, Forza 5 wasn't massively cooperative in this one. As you would have noticed, there were all the same cars running in 3 races. That was because basically my Xbox gave up. I don't know what was going on with it. It just decided that it wasn't going to let me invite anybody that wasn't already on my friends list. So yeah, I'm sorry to the people who couldn't take part in this one. My Xbox had a funny turn, and it just wouldn't. I go on the option to find people, I'd click the button, and it just didn't do anything. So I couldn't invite anybody. I had to invite the few people I had on my friends list, and a few people I could find on followers list, and then I got somebody else in the lobby to invite people. But yeah, we only got so many people in, and I guess some people didn't realise who was inviting who. I tried to tell people on the forums, but there's only so many people that were paying attention to that. So yeah, it was, again, fairly dodgy, Forza 5. It's just, I don't know what's going on with it. It's been long enough. It should be working by now, but it just isn't. The lobby chat was broken as well. You could barely talk in there because everything was doing stupid robotic voices. So yeah, we won't be on Forza 5 for a while again. We will do our sort of bi-monthly visit to Forza 5 in a couple of months and hope that it'll work better, but I'm not got my fingers crossed for that one. So the next versus the community shall be on Thursday, the 3rd of July. Yes, it will be July. We shall be racing C-Class Toyotas. And we'll not be racing drag tyres. It'll be normal C-Class, build the cars however you want them into C-Class. The races shall start at 7 PM British summer time. If you wish to sign up and take part in that, then you can go to our forums. There will be a link in the description. Find the versus the community section, and you can sign up in there. However, that is it for today, so thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.